Danielle Walker of the blog Against All Grains. Today we're talking about her new, incredibly popular already book, Meals Made Simple. And thank you so much for joining us here at Q Kitchen.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
First of all, let's talk a little bit about your story and your first book and sort of how it led to the second book, because you have kind of a dramatic road to a paleo lifestyle. But
I do.
You talk about it as though it can be applicable to everyone. So give us a little update on you for the 3 people who are not familiar with your blog.
Yeah, so I didn't come to this way of eating by choice. I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease when I was 22, and after many, many years of medications and hospital stays and blood transfusions, I stripped all of these things from my diet: grains, legumes, lactose, processed foods, processed sugars, and saw almost immediate improvement.
Yeah, but so the interesting thing about you is you've taken this blog, and the response to it has been obviously from people who have their own food issues, but also just from people who want to be healthier.
Exactly.
And they want to eat delicious food.
Exactly.
So when you say that, a lot of people are thinking like, oh my God, I don't want to give up all of these things. But how do you make those things delicious? I think for people who are a little bit like, I don't want to go paleo.
I felt that way too. I always tell people I had this serious nightmare that I'd be eating grilled chicken and steamed broccoli for the rest of my life. And at a young age, and someone who likes food, I was like, I can't do that. And so it quickly became my motto to create foods that you could eat and love and feel well at the same time.
Right.
And also to make sure that nobody was feeling deprived. And so I really set out to recreate all of the foods that I loved, all of the comfort foods, the casseroles that my mom used to make, or the cookies and the cakes and things like that, that I could make this sustainable and eat this way for the rest of my life, but at the same time really enjoy food.
Right.
And like you said, I came to it because of an illness, and there are a lot of people that come to it because of an illness, but there are so many people that just do it because they want to feel better.
Just starting with the basics, what ingredients do you find add the most flavor or the most helpful for people who don't even really know where to begin?
I love to use herbs, and seasonings and dried spices. I think people forget about those so much. Like they have, containers in their cupboards that are expired.
So they don't care.
Yeah, exactly. And when you've got all the other things in there and all the additives, you necessarily don't need them. But you can add some fresh herbs and spices to your dishes and crank up all of those, flavors and the textures. And so that's probably the biggest thing. But I think adding things like almond flour, instead of your flour, and replacing your milk with almond milk and things of that sort, And I think one of the things that I like to do is venture into different cuisines, because I think you can get bored really easily. And so I love to experiment with different flavor profiles, and keep things fresh and exciting so that we don't want to run, back to the frozen pizza at the grocery store.
Right. And you mentioned flour and milk. Let's talk about baking, because I think for a lot of people that's the rub. And they say, well, I'd love to go paleo, but I really like cake.
Right.
How do you find ways to make desserts that are paleo friendly without trying to recreate something? Because obviously there's certain things you can never have.
Sure.
So how do you have that balance?
I think first of all, desserts, just like regular desserts, are kind of special occasions. It's like, yes, I love to bake and I do recreate all of those things. I really pride myself in actually recreating a lot of the textures that you're used to. I'm known for my chocolate chip cookies actually on my blog. And I, in my first book, recreated all of the favorites: lemon meringue pie and chocolate pudding pie and layered cakes. And so you can do it. It's definitely difficult when you first are starting to learn how to use those flours, coconut flour and almond flour. But that's why I wrote the books, so people don't have to experiment with them. They can literally follow the recipe, and know that it will turn out, because I had lots of failures. Lots of failures for the first few months that I was experimenting.
What are the things that you tried and said, what, maybe this isn't for me? And what are the things that you looked at and said, actually, these are recipes that are much easier than I thought they'd be?
So what I really focused on in this book was not 5 ingredient or less, things. You can find those anywhere. What I really focused on about the simplicity of it is just planning ahead. I think the biggest problem people run into is they go into the grocery store without a plan, and they come back with all these ingredients, they don't know what to do with it. So I included 8 weeks of meal plans in there for them, as well as grocery lists that accompany it, which I think really helps people, feel like they can do it. I think it's really daunting at first and really overwhelming. I also did a lot of testing of making things ahead and freezing. Lots of crock pot recipes. It's those things that really help take kind of the fear out of it for people. Then that, planning and doing some things in advance, taking a Sunday or half a day to chop up your veggies, beforehand and get them in, at mealtime, and so that you're not spending hours and hours in the kitchen.
You have a lot of those kind of swaps of noodles made out of vegetables. What are some of the other, swaps and tricks that you've found are surprising but great?
Yeah, well, noodles or vegetable noodles instead of noodles. You can also do spaghetti squash, which is really great. Your flours, of course, almond and coconut flour, cashew flour instead of your wheat flour, and almond milk and cashew milk instead of, your dairy milk. The cashew cream was probably one of the biggest things, and it's nothing new. Vegan cooks use it a lot, paleo cooks use it a lot, but it's a wonderful dairy heavy cream sub, and it works so great in so many things because it has a pretty neutral flavor and it gives things that kind of thick, creamy consistency. So that's probably, my favorite.
How do you find balancing your meals has become? Because, I think for a lot of people it's like, I'm going to put a protein and then I'm going to have a big thing of rice next to it.
Right,
and maybe a little veggie on the side.
Right.
How do you find balancing the recipes to all go into one meal? Because a lot of people would say, well, I don't want to have 4 veggies as my meal.
Sure.
So how do you recommend balancing that?
Well, I think that's one of the biggest problems in America is we actually don't eat enough vegetables. And then one of the biggest, kind of misconceptions with paleo is that 3/4 of your plate is meat and then it's just a tiny bit of vegetables, which really is not, the way that we go about it, and it's really not that healthy for you either.
Yeah.
So I think really incorporating, a really great vegetable or a salad. I'm from California, so we do tons of fresh salads with, fruit thrown in it and almonds and things like that. So we love to sit down with a salad first. But what I tried to do at Meals Made Simple was do a lot of one-pot things as well, where you're getting your vegetables, your meats, all of that kind of in one dish, as opposed to trying to plan like, okay, here's my protein that I want to make and here's my side dish that I want to make. But the food can really look appetizing and it can really look great, and you can get your protein and your vegetables and have it all kind of be one cohesive meal.
Well, thank you so much, Danielle, for all of your tips on approaching paleo. And obviously, if you want to pick up Meals Made Simple, you can. It's a New York Times bestseller. You can also go to againstallgrain.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.